The morning sun bathed my lavender fields in a golden glow, the breeze carrying the soft, calming scent across my land. Owning a thriving organic perfume business built from these very fields was my pride and joy. Every stalk of lavender held value, not just monetary but sentimental. This land had been in my family for generations, and I had turned it into something extraordinary. I was kneeling among the rows, inspecting the blossoms, when the distant hum of an engine disrupted the tranquility. I stood up, shielding my eyes from the sun, just in time to see an ATV tearing across my property. My heart jumped into my throat. A woman, blonde bob bouncing, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, was gripping the handles like she was leading a cavalry charge. My carefully tended lavender flattened under her wheels, crushed stalks releasing their oil into the dirt. "Hey," I shouted, waving my arms. She didn't stop. If anything, she sped up, carving a reckless path through the field. I ran after her, my boots sinking into the torn earth, but she was already out of reach, disappearing beyond the tree line. Fuming, I stormed back toward my house. I didn't need to guess who she was. Karen Montgomery, self-appointed queen of the nearby HOA, had been a thorn in my side ever since I refused to sell my land to the new cookie-cutter development creeping into the area. She had made it clear that my farm, with its unsightly barns and excessive plant growth, her words, didn't belong near her pristine, uniform neighborhood. I reached my porch just as a sleek white SUV pulled up on the gravel driveway. Karen stepped out, removing her sunglasses with a dramatic sigh. "Oh, there you are," she said, as if she hadn't just gone full Mad Max on my crops. "I wanted to talk to you about your little flower project." I folded my arms. "You mean my business?" She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Right, that. You see, some of us have allergies, and the scent wafting from here is quite strong. It's just not suitable for a residential area." I stared at her, barely able to process the audacity. "This isn't a residential area, it's my farm." Karen sighed, glancing over her shoulder at the fields she'd just ravaged. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it? Your farm doesn't belong here anymore." I clenched my jaw, my pulse pounding. She thought she could bully me off my own land. Not a chance. I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Get off my property, Karen." She scoffed, flipping her hair as she turned back to her SUV. "Suit yourself, but don't be surprised when people start taking action." She drove away, leaving a trail of dust in her wake. I looked back at my ruined lavender, the crushed plants a painful reminder that this wasn't just an accident. It was a warning. Karen had no idea what she had just started. The more I stared at the damage, the angrier I got. The deep tire tracks had torn through several rows of lavender, the delicate purple flowers now a flattened mess. I knelt and ran my fingers over the broken stalks. This wasn't just about my business. This was years of hard work, care, and love destroyed in minutes by a woman who thought she could do whatever she pleased. Karen's little stunt wasn't just reckless, it was calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing, and that smug little comment before she left. "Don't be surprised when people start taking action." What did that even mean? I pulled out my phone and snapped pictures of the damage. If she thought she could intimidate me into leaving, she was sorely mistaken. I'd fought too hard to build this business, and I wasn't about to roll over for some power-hungry HOA tyrant. The next morning, I drove into town to file a report with the sheriff's office. Not that I expected much. Karen had her claws deep in the local HOA, and I wouldn't be surprised if she had friends in places that mattered. But I wasn't going to let this slide. "Got any proof it was her?" Deputy Reynolds asked, leaning back in his chair as he skimmed through my photos. I frowned. I saw her. She was on the ATV. Who else would it be? He sighed, rubbing his temple. Look, I hear you, but unless you caught her in the act on camera, it's her word against yours. Frustration bubbled in my chest. So you're saying she can just destroy my crops and get away with it? Reynolds shrugged. I'm saying she's got a way of twisting things. She'll probably say she was lost or avoiding an animal or something equally ridiculous. Even if I go question her, she'll deny it. I clenched my fists. I knew Karen would weasel her way out of this. She always did. Driving back home, I tried to calm down, but when I pulled onto my land, my stomach sank. A bright red notice was nailed to my front gate. Notice of violation. Unapproved agricultural activity. I ripped it down, scanning the nonsense claims. Apparently, my lavender fields were now considered a public nuisance due to excessive fragrance exposure and potential allergic reactions. The HOA, an HOA I wasn't even a part of, had filed a formal complaint with the county. I laughed bitterly. Karen wasn't just trying to intimidate me, she was trying to shut me down entirely. She had no idea who she was messing with. Karen had made her move, and now it was my turn. But first, I had to assess the damage. I spent the next few hours combing through the lavender fields, tallying the destruction. Nearly a quarter of one section was ruined, weeks of labor wasted. The crushed lavender couldn't be used for oil extraction, which meant a loss in sales. And to top it off, the ridiculous HOA complaint had the potential to cause more problems down the line. I refused to let this slide. That evening, I decided to pay Karen a little visit. I wasn't one for unnecessary confrontation, but this had gone too far. I drove into her pristine neighborhood, where every lawn was identical, every house a slightly different shade of beige, and every mailbox stood at a regulation-approved height. It was the kind of place that sucked the soul out of anyone who lived there. Karen's house stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, complete with an over-the-top fountain in the front yard and a garden of expensive, perfectly arranged flowers that probably never saw a day of actual dirt. I parked across the street and marched up her driveway. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Karen stood there, dressed in an immaculate beige outfit that matched her surroundings, holding a glass of white wine like a queen on her throne. "Well, if it isn't the lavender farmer," she said with a smirk. "What brings you to civilization?" I held up the crumpled violation notice. "Care to explain this?" Karen took a slow sip of her wine. "Oh, just a necessary step to keep the community safe. You understand, of course." I stepped closer. "You and I both know this is garbage. My farm has been here for years. You don't get to march in and declare it a nuisance just because you don't like the smell." She sighed dramatically, feigning sympathy. "Look, I understand you're upset, but let's be real. You're sitting on a gold mine. If you just sell the land, you wouldn't have to worry about all these unfortunate complications." There it was, the truth. This wasn't about allergies or complaints. This was about her trying to push me out so she could expand her perfect little neighborhood. I crossed my arms. "Not for sale." Karen's smile tightened. "Well, that's a shame. I'd hate for things to become difficult for you." The threat hung in the air between us. I turned on my heel and walked away, my blood boiling. She thought she could pressure me into selling, that she could ruin my business and get away with it. I had other plans, and unlike her, I knew how to play dirty the right way. Karen had pushed the wrong person. She might have had her HOA goons and their petty rule book, but I had something far more powerful: my knowledge of my land, my business, and most importantly, my community. If she wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. First, I needed leverage. If Karen was willing to fabricate complaints against me, I had no doubt she had skeletons in her own perfectly organized closet. I started digging. It didn't take long. A few conversations with some of the older folks in town, plus a little online searching, revealed a goldmine of hypocrisy. Turns out, Karen had been involved in multiple shady HOA dealings over the years. Everything from forcing residents to pay ridiculous fines for minor infractions to using HOA funds for beautification projects that just so happened to benefit her own property. Even better, the ATV she had used to destroy my lavender field wasn't even hers. It belonged to the HOA, meant for community maintenance, which meant she had misused HOA property for personal reasons. That, on its own, was a major violation. Now, I just needed a way to use this information effectively. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, photos, statements from frustrated residents, anything that could be useful. I also set up cameras around my property. If Karen tried anything else, I'd have solid proof this time. But I wasn't just going to expose her. No, that would be too easy. I needed something poetic, something that would make her regret ever stepping onto my land. That's when the perfect idea struck. Karen hated my lavender. She claimed it was a nuisance, an intrusion into her perfect little neighborhood. Well, if she thought my farm was a problem now, she had no idea what was coming next. I spent the next few days preparing, making calls, and setting everything into motion. Soon, Karen was going to experience firsthand just how powerful my little flower project really was. She wanted to play dirty? Fine. But I was about to show her that messing with my lavender empire was the biggest mistake she'd ever made. The plan had to be perfect. I wasn't just going for revenge, I was going for poetic justice. Karen had tried to destroy my business with lies and intimidation, so I was going to use my business to destroy her reputation. And the best part? It would all be perfectly legal. First, I ramped up production. Normally, I distilled my lavender oil in small batches, but this time I went all out. I brought in extra workers, extended hours, and filled every single distillery I owned to maximum capacity. Within days, the air around my farm was thick with the most potent lavender scent imaginable. But that was just step one. Next, I reached out to a few connections in the natural wellness industry. A well-placed post on social media about my exclusive new line of artisanal organic lavender products got picked up by a couple of influencers. Before I knew it, my little farm was swarming with customers, bloggers, and even a few reporters eager to cover the small-town business taking the natural perfume world by storm. This wasn't just good for business, it was strategic. The more attention my farm got, the harder it would be for Karen to push her ridiculous nuisance complaint. After all, shutting down a thriving, eco-friendly business that was attracting positive press, that wouldn't look good for her HOA. But the real stroke of genius came with my final move. I partnered with a local candle company and donated hundreds of lavender-scented candles to businesses all over town, especially to shops, cafes, and even a yoga studio in Karen's neighborhood. Within days, the entire HOA was bathed in the calming, floral aroma of my farm. It was inescapable. Karen had tried to get rid of my lavender. Instead, I had made sure it was the one thing she could never escape. The best part? Every candle, oil diffuser, and sachet of dried lavender had my farm's name and logo printed on it, proudly displaying exactly where all this intrusive fragrance was coming from. And judging by the furious email I received from Karen, subject line, "This is harassment," she had noticed. I smiled, leaning back in my chair. Oh, but it was just beginning. Karen's meltdown started small, an angry email demanding that I cease and desist from intentionally disrupting the HOA environment with overwhelming fragrance exposure. I ignored it, of course. If she thought she could threaten me with fake legal jargon, she was in for a rude awakening. Then came the desperate measures. The HOA held an emergency meeting, during which Karen ranted about the Lavender invasion and demanded a town ordinance banning excessive floral pollution. Unfortunately for her, the meeting was public, and thanks to my growing network of allies, half the town showed up: farmers, shop owners, and local business leaders, all eager to defend my farm. What exactly constitutes excessive floral pollution? One man asked, barely hiding his smirk. Karen sputtered. When it disrupts daily life, when it forces people to suffer from strong, unavoidable smells. A woman from the yoga studio raised a hand. "We love the lavender, actually. My customers say it's the most relaxing the neighborhood has ever smelled." Karen's face turned red. "That's not the point." An elderly man chuckled. "Sounds like the point to me." The mayor, who had come out of sheer curiosity, simply shook his head. "Mrs. Montgomery, I'm afraid this isn't a legal matter. You can't just ban nature." With that, her last hope of a legitimate complaint crumbled. But I wasn't done yet. That same night, I posted a video of the meeting online. It didn't take long for it to go viral. Karen, red-faced and flustered, ranting about too much lavender while the entire town politely laughed at her. It was internet gold. Within hours, people from all over were mocking her, leaving comments like, "Imagine losing a war to flowers." Karen versus Mother Nature, Round 1. "Someone get this woman some chamomile before she strokes out." By the next morning, her name was everywhere. And thanks to a few well-placed reminders from disgruntled HOA members, her questionable financial dealings started coming to light. Turns out, some of those hefty HOA fines had never quite made it to the proper accounts. By the end of the week, Karen wasn't just humiliated, she was under investigation. And all she had wanted was to get rid of my lavender. Poetic, wasn't it? Karen's downfall was nothing short of spectacular. The HOA board, once her loyal army of rule-enforcing minions, turned on her the moment the financial discrepancies came to light. Suddenly, her once tight grip on the neighborhood slipped like lavender oil through her fingers. A formal investigation into HOA mismanagement was launched, and Karen was suspended from her position pending the outcome. But the real humiliation came when local news picked up the story. "HOA president faces backlash over war on lavender," the headline read. A clip from the meeting where she dramatically declared my farm a fragrance-based assault played on repeat. It became a meme overnight, with people remixing it into songs and joke videos. My personal favorite was one that dubbed her voice over dramatic battle music, calling her General Karen of the Anti-Lavender Army. But while the internet had its fun, Karen was living a nightmare. Her once pristine neighborhood was now drowning in my lavender products. More and more residents, amused by the whole ordeal, bought my candles and essential oils out of sheer spite. Some even went as far as planting their own lavender bushes, right in front of Karen's house. And then came the final blow. The HOA, desperate to distance itself from Karen's bad press, issued an apology to me. They formally rescinded the complaint against my farm, calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. The town council even offered me a grant to expand my business as a goodwill gesture. Karen, she was left standing in the wreckage of her own making. No power, no influence, and thanks to the investigation, possibly no position in the neighborhood she once ruled. The last time I saw her, she was storming out of an HOA meeting, her face twisted in outrage as her former allies whispered behind her back. She shot me a glare, but I just smiled. She had trampled my lavender, thinking she could crush me along with it. Instead, I had used it to bury her. With Karen effectively dethroned and my business thriving, peace returned to my lavender fields. The town, now fully aware of the ridiculousness of Karen's war on flowers, had embraced my farm more than ever. My sales skyrocketed, and the publicity from the whole ordeal brought in customers from neighboring towns. Even the local farmers' market saw an uptick in business, with vendors jokingly selling Karen's least favorite lavender soap and anti-Karen essential oils. People loved the story, the small-town farmer standing up to the HOA tyrant and winning with nothing but flowers and patience. As for Karen, she had all but vanished from public life. The last rumor I heard was that she had resigned from the HOA entirely after a failed attempt to reinstate herself. The residents she once controlled were more than happy to see her go. One afternoon, as I walked through my fields, inhaling the rich, calming scent of lavender, I heard a car pull up. I turned to see one of my neighbors from the HOA development stepping out. He looked a little sheepish as he approached. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "So, any chance you sell bulk orders of that lavender oil?" I raised an eyebrow, thinking of starting a business. He chuckled. "Not exactly. Karen's house? Someone planted a whole row of lavender bushes right along her property line. And well, let's just say the smell is driving her nuts." I laughed, shaking my head. Karma works fast. He grinned. "Yeah. Anyway, I figure if the whole neighborhood smells like lavender now, I might as well embrace it." I led him toward my shop, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Karen had tried to wipe my business off the map, but in the end, she'd only made it stronger. And now, every time she stepped outside, she'd be reminded of the one thing she could never escape: the sweet, overwhelming scent of my victory.